to the Unleashed podcast, where we believe that life is better when it is lived on purpose. My name is Molly Brunk, and I am joined with lead pastor of Be Hope Church, Brad Thompson. And today we have a guest because she is our very first guest of our series where we're just going to interview incredible leaders and professionals in our area within our church. And so Becky Brown has joined us today. Hi, Becky. How are you?
Hi, Molly. Hi, Brad. Glad to be here.
So Becky is a licensed clinical counselor for New Life Ministries, which she can talk more about. And she has all of these incredible accomplishments. She's written books and co-authored books. But I know Becky as like my second mom. So I'll let her talk more about what she does. But you work at New Life. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So New Life Ministries, we've been around about 35 years, and we have a radio program where we answer people's questions from all points of life. You know, people struggle with stuff. So whether it's relationships or heartache or anxiety or any of those things, we have a crew of co-hosts that are psychologists, counselors who answer the questions. And it's solidly Christian and solidly counseling. Like it's, awesome. It's very good. Of course, I'm biased, but I've been doing it for a long time. Also, we have counselors all across the country. We have coaches across the country. We do intensives where we help people move forward in their life, which is a theme, I think, here at the Be Hope Land.
It's our annual theme.
Yeah. At the Be Hope Land. I like that.
At the Be Hope Land, yeah.
At the Be Hope Land. But yeah, and I love that. And I like what I imagine is that you do on-air like counseling sessions. And so, but I like the way that you phrased it, like people call in with questions and we have those responses. Do you most often refer people out after phone calls?
Yes. Yeah. When people are calling us, we know our three top values are truth, connection, and transformation. True truth, God's truth, connection, redemptive relationships, where we want people to be in community, and transformation based on Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Let God transform you. We know that people struggle, and when you're isolated, it's not going to go well. So we want to connect them with counselors or coaches in their area, groups. We have a whole recovery movement, life recovery groups, which integrates biblical truth with the 12 steps. We have over 600 groups that meet nationwide each week. Wow. So we want people to have a new life. We want them to have a better life. That's what God wants for them. So
that's really good. I love that. New life.
Speaking of new life.
What
about having a life?
Get a life is what you're telling us. In order to have a life, we need boundaries.
Yeah. Who needs boundaries?
Everyone, right? Well, that's what we're going to find out from Becky today. So we believe that people need boundaries. We just don't really know much about them. And Becky knows a lot. So today we're going to talk about boundaries, right?
We are going to talk about boundaries.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And it really just comes from my struggle. Once again, we always have a fumble moment on this podcast. And I struggle with boundaries. So.
And it sounds like, I feel like when people say that, it sounds like a negative thing of like inappropriate boundaries. It's like, it's not inappropriate boundaries. It's like you struggle to tell people no.
Yeah. I know on this podcast at times it comes across as though I'm a jerk and I don't care.
Sometimes.
I really do have a sensitive heart.
That's what I'm here. Like, that's my job is to say, Brad, you can't say that because it makes you look bad.
I have never been good at ending meetings. I'll just give a quick example. I had a great pastor. He would walk into hospitals and he would be in and out in less than 5 minutes, but made people feel like they were $1 million. They were cared for, loved, pastored. I would walk in and they'd be like, "Oh, sweetie, sit down." And I'm like, "Oh, I can't stay long." And they're like, "Just sit down." And an hour later, here I am talking with somebody who had knee replacement surgery. And I could never figure out, how did he get in and out in 5 minutes? And that's just a struggle for me. I think the other thing too is knowing when to be accessible and who to be accessible to. Those are my biggest struggles. Saying no and knowing when to be accessible.
And as the person who keeps his calendar, and this is where we have most tension.
Are we doing an intervention? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah. Okay. And so this is where we have most tension at, because he'll have like back-to-back meetings, but sometimes he can't get out of the first meeting. And so like I have to call him or go in there and like stop it, or different times like that. And then there's also times where his calendar is jam packed, and it's because he has added 3 things on top of the things that I have already added. And so
it's lovely.
This is where we're at, Becky. So do you have any thoughts on just Brad's fumble moment in relationship with boundaries?
How does it make you feel, Bud? No, I think one of the big things is, boundaries are a defining line. And so it's interesting because you were amazed at the pastor's ability to go in and out.
Yeah.
I don't think he was confused about what he was doing. And you may get confused when you don't have boundaries about what you're about. And that can apply to anybody. It's not just you, Brad. But I mean, think about if you go into that same hospital room and I am here to touch base, to pray for this person, to, be present. And I could be present because I know that I'm going to leave in about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But the minute you lose sight of your deadline, your boundary, you actually leave the room before your body physically leaves the room. Because you're in your head thinking, I got to get out of here.
Yep.
How is this going to stop?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? And you're feeling the tension, the person that you're with, completely unaware.
Oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a clue.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that line. Boundaries are what you're about. Is that how you would define a boundary?
No, boundaries are a defining line.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be what you're about, your purpose. It can be property. I mean, how do you know where to stop cutting the grass?
I don't. I actually cut my neighbor's grass.
I'm sure you do.
Because they have weeds that go into mine and it bothers me. I just fertilize their half of the yard.
That is
You do
hilarious.
need help?
I'm dead serious.
This is why we're here today. Help us.
I tore down my fence because I did not like having a boundary line and my yard feeling smaller.
Wow. Okay. So one of the best books on boundaries is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Millions have been sold. Millions of people have been helped. But the reason why I'm bringing this up right now is because one of their first definitions is it's like a fence. And you... And the fact that you tore your fence down, Brad, tells me volumes about your issue with boundaries. Because when you think about a fence line, it just determines there's no feelings about the fence. It just is. And then there's a gate, and you can decide what comes in and out of your property. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you tore your fence down, well, can we pray now?
And fertilize my neighbor's yard. Don't tell anybody.
And how did your neighbor feel about that?
Oh, they didn't know.
Even more powerful.
To be fair, it was on the outside of their fence. So it's not like I went in their yard. But there is a invisible line that the county has set that I just don't adhere to. And if their weeds
You're just
don't get
proving
taken
the
care
point
of.
that Molly and I have already established.
I know.
Where did that come from, Brad?
That's a good... maybe the military. I was told I had boundaries in the military for so long. I'm getting into the mental part of this, aren't I?
It happens with me all the time.
That I think after I got out, I don't want somebody to tell me what to do. I don't like people telling me what to do.
Yeah. So what
I know.
But what you're doing with that though, Brad, is you're living in reactivity as opposed to response. And what happens a lot of times when we have boundaries that are being crossed, we start to live in reactivity. We either like the story that John and Henry tell in the book, right in the beginning, they talk about these parents come in because their college-age son is not thriving, and he's failing out of college, and he's not taking life seriously. And Henry says, "Well, where is he?" Well, he had a ski trip planned, so he couldn't be here for the appointment. He goes, "Well, I don't think he does have a problem. I think you guys have the problem." And so it's determining who has the problem. But if you are going to live in reaction to any limits, and that can come in lots of different ways, you're not paying attention to how that makes you thrive and feel, really. It's like paying attention to what's your motivation.
Interesting. So I think one of the questions I have, and it kind of goes back to me not liking fences, why does the word boundary feel so taboo? And I don't know if it feels like that for the leaders that are watching, people watching, but do you find that that word feels almost taboo for some people?
Yeah, but usually it's because of some previous experience. So what you just identified was the fact that because you were in a military system, which requires strict boundaries, because if they don't have the boundaries, their forces don't go in the positive direction, right? You got to have some sort of order.
Yeah.
Well, in your response or your reaction to it, you're not really paying attention to how that's impacting you. Now, there's other people that have struggles with boundaries because it makes them feel bad. This goes back to your hospital example.
Okay.
You feel badly to tell the person, I can only be here 15 minutes and I've got to go. What? Molly is just,
I do have a question. Talk more about other experiences that people go through that make them push back against boundaries. So military was one. What are some other ones that you commonly see in people that they're pushing back because they've been through what?
Well, it could be also an inflated ego where nobody's going to tell me what to do. And I'm going to be my own person and the law doesn't apply to me. And that gets to be a little bit more sociopath. That's not you. That's not you. But I mean, you can see the extremes. But typically the complaints that we have about boundaries is when we're in a relationship where one person is overpowering the other.
Okay.
And the person who doesn't have the capability to establish a boundary is because their expectation is that the other person is going to somehow know what to do or do it the right way, or they're going to understand. And really, we teach people how to treat us. Our boundaries are internal. It's what we decide. And so many times I've taught this class, I've taught boundaries forever. And one of the things that people say is, I'm going to set a boundary and I'm going to tell you, Molly, my boundary with you is X, Y, and Z, thinking that Molly's going to go, oh, okay, let me just do that, right? The reality is it has to be intrinsic. It has to be my decision.
Right.
This is what I'm going to be about. So for an example, going back to the meeting issue, if you don't establish your schedule, you are impeding in the time that you have scheduled for other people, which is what I did today to you guys. But I think about, you're not respecting the time. You're not respecting your time.
Yeah.
There's no feeling about it, but the feelings get wrapped around that axle because you start to make judgments on you, on them. And, and it's better to be aware of where you begin and end, where your time frame begins and ends, and respect it.
Yeah. And I think that's the struggle too. Like, so we talk about, like going back to the hospital example, but more so like when this would connect with people that I'm communicating with on the weekend or people that I have meetings with. Like, I want to make sure that I'm fully present to people and that I care for people. But I also have this fear that if I'm cutting the conversation short, what it's communicating to them is that they're not valuable or that they're not worth my time. And that's the fear I always feel inside.
How do you address that fear?
Well, I think more recently is just, we talked about this before the podcast. Like I had to say no to something. And that no came from assessing like, well, where's the value? Where's the reward? Like, what do I really need to spend my time on? And to be frank, like my time is precious. Your time is precious. And to give somebody half an hour actually is a lot of my time.
Right.
And so instead of seeing it as I'm not giving them enough time, for me, I got to reframe it to say, you've given them a significant amount of your time. And you've empowered them. You've lived into what you said you would do. But there has to be a moment where you move on so you can continue to do that.
And to your first example of when you feel badly with a person, you don't want them to feel badly. You're presuming they feel badly.
Right.
As opposed to checking in with them.
Right.
And say, I've got 30 minutes and I know that it's not all the time that you need, but this is where I can be really present. And then it's a tool that we learn in Counseling 101 is you've got a 50-minute session. And typically the person will wait until about 45 minutes into the session to start talking about what they really need to talk about. And that happens a lot, right? Because the flow gets going, the energy goes, and then it's like, okay, well, we have to stop and we'll pick this up next time. it's a practice.
Which is funny because like when I ask for meetings with people, I will upfront say, I need 25 minutes of your time, or I need 30 minutes of your time. Like I let them know how much time I need, because I kind of wish people would do that with me.
Well, but how do you govern that then? That's like what I said when Molly, I need this from you, expecting her to go along with my boundary. I'm in charge of the boundary.
Fair.
And so if you say to somebody, I got 25 minutes, it's on you to pay attention to the 25 minutes.
That's good.
And if they're disappointed, they'll be okay. They'll be okay.
Have you ever had somebody disappointed with you because you've had
never, Brad, never. People delight when I walk in the room. Are you kidding me? No, but here's the biblical example. Jesus, who's perfect, right? The story of the rich young ruler is the perfect example of boundaries.
This.
So the rich young ruler, he describes him as the rich young ruler. So we know that he's got an issue with his youth, his notoriety, and his money. The rich young ruler's all excited. He comes to Jesus. I want to do everything. I want to be with you. I'm going to win this game, basically is what he's kind of presenting. And Jesus is like, okay, well, you got to give up all that stuff and follow me. What does the rich young ruler do? He goes away sad, right? Now, the next part, Jesus runs after him and changes the rules. No, he does not. He and then he goes on to say it's easier for a camel to go through than eye of a needle.
Right.
But the principle there is people are going to have feelings, and feelings are not always there for you to fix.
Or for you to own.
Yeah. That's a boundary.
Oh, that's good.
You're already learning. This is amazing. I feel like I'm just in your counseling session, but I love it. And so,
well, the list that I wrote down the list that Henry and John give in that book. A list of boundaries are things like gifts, talents, skills, time, space, and values.
Well, that's good.
And that is your identity too, right? What are you going to, it's what you just said, Brad, that what are you going to give your time to?
Right.
And that is knowing who you are, knowing what your value is, and what you want to be about.
Yeah. Can you repeat those one more time?
Yeah.
We'll put these in the show notes, by the way.
Gifts, talents, skills, time, space, values.
That's good.
That's good.
One of the physical boundaries is your skin. And think about that. What if
I do have dry skin.
What if you didn't have skin, though? What would that be like?
Gross.
It would be gross. But it's just a basic skin in kind of idea.
Yeah.
I like that.
Me too. I feel like we're learning so much just based off of your experiences, but
you're next.
I know I am next, but it's fine. But do you think oftentimes we can create too limiting of boundaries based off of the season that we're in or the emotional state that we're in? Like, is that something that you see people do?
Well, yes, except for define limiting. Like, what would that look like if it were limiting?
Well, that actually might get more into the next episode, because the next episode we're talking about when people maybe misuse the word boundary to prevent themselves from doing anything outside of their comfort zone.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe we'll save that one for the next episode. But then when you are creating boundaries, how do you gauge the health of the boundaries that you're creating?
Well, it goes back to the definition of, what is the purpose of the boundary? We have created boundaries without even being aware of it. Everything from, it doesn't sound like a boundary, but for example, what do you drink? And I'm not talking about liquor. I'm just talking about in general.
Water and coffee.
Okay. So if I came to you, Molly, and I said, hey, I got a Diet Coke, because we all know that Diet Coke is supreme, right? What would you say to that?
I would say yes.
You would say yes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I didn't include Diet Coke.
So Diet Coke, water. Okay.
Diet Coke, water, and coffee.
Even caffeine-free Diet Coke.
How about Diet Pepsi?
No.
Right?
No.
It's a hard no, right?
Yes.
It's like a boundary. And it's literally so we have boundaries about a lot of things that we don't recognize as boundaries. The things that we do. The other thing, one of the other boundaries that we talk about is distance, whether it's geographical distance or emotional distance. People who will not get our time, which I'm sure is what we're going to talk about next episode.
Mhm.
But when you think about, where you sit, like, those are boundaries. And now that we have chairs instead of pews,
Mm-hmm.
those boundaries are real clear, right? Because
Yeah.
a pew, everybody sits wherever, right? And I was thinking about when you think about the first time that boundaries comes into our lives, it's usually when we're very small and, sister or brother is, they're sitting on my side of the car or they're
Mhm.
sitting on my side of the couch or they've got my toy.
Mhm.
There's a real clear definition about what's mine and what
Yeah.
somebody else shouldn't be having access to.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Becky, what would you, so boundaries are defining lines. What is at stake for somebody who doesn't have boundaries? I want to talk to the people who, like me, don't have good boundaries. What is at stake for them? And what are some clear signs that they need boundaries? So let's start with this question. What are some clear signs you need boundaries?
When you feel that someone is overtaking you. And that can come in a lot of different ways. Everything from, really terrible experiences. We hear about people who've experienced abuse or neglect, where your life is diminished, where you're not seen, valued, your worth isn't recognized, you don't have agency for yourself. All of those things are warning flags. Like you might have boundary issues if.
That's a good one.
That is good.
Are there any others that you?
Yeah, typically in a work situation, if you are feeling resentful and bitter.
It's good.
And it's so funny. When we were in school, all of us experienced group projects and we all groaned and we all commiserated. But the reality is life is one big group project, right?
Yeah.
It's whether it's a work group,
Right.
a church group, family group, neighborhood group. We have to learn how to function within community. And that's why a lot of people, when the boundaries are crossed, the resentment, the bitterness, it's not fair. And we don't have words to be able to express our boundary.
Yeah.
Because we feel bad. We don't want them to
Yeah.
feel bad. Or, we come out charging because the boundary has been crossed. No means no.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. That is really good.
We'll end this episode here. I want to end it with this last question, and I want to go back to it, which is what's at stake if we don't have boundaries? We'll talk about how do we set boundaries in the next episode. But what is at stake for somebody who doesn't have boundaries?
If you think about, we'll go back to the yard.
I knew it was going to come back up.
Yeah, because think about this, Brad. You without the boundary line, you essentially could be fertilizing the whole neighborhood.
People do need better yards.
You might now. So great.
And what that will do is it will impact your purpose because you're going to be distracted by the lack of boundaries. You'll be all over in everybody else's yard as opposed to what you want to be about. And at the end of your life, you're going to look back and go, boy, my neighborhood looked great.
Man, so many implications and lessons. Fertilize your own yard.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
We should leave it there.
She said, well, there we go. Well, do we have any final thoughts before we wrap up with some hope or nopes?
No, I think some powerful things I wrote down. Boundaries are defining lines. We want to live, I wrote this, we want to live out of responsibility, not out of reactivity. Others' feelings aren't for you to own. And then I love this idea, lastly, that what's at stake is, or just knowing when I need a boundary is when I feel like I'm being overtaken or I'm resentful or I'm bitter.
That's good.
So those are my notes.
No, that's really good. Any final thoughts, Becky, before I ask you?
Yeah. I think about when we think about resentment and bitterness, in Ephesians 4, it talks about get rid of all bitterness and resentment. And the reason why that's important is not because of the other, it's because of what's going on inside of us. And people who become resentful and bitter because they don't have boundaries, it breaks them down. As opposed, the other people are just going to go on with their life. They're not going to be. They're not
And the Bible
weird.
describes it as a root.
Yes.
Right. It's not something that you see on the surface, but it's something that it's like weaving its way deep down inside of your soul. And I mean, I hate weeds because it's hard to get rid of the roots.
There you go. Full circle.
Full circle. That was a good pastor moment. we end every episode with a hope or nope. And one of the things that I love most about Becky is that she has strong opinions. And I just love that about her. And so instead of giving you a traditional hope or nope, I want to start off with the question of what are your current nopes? Like what things right now are you like, very much against? It can be silly. It can be...
the first one is Diet Pepsi. I mean, it should be, should not be legal. It's just terrible.
I'd rather drink unsweet tea.
I do compromise my own boundaries though, if that's the only option.
Oh,
Never.
no, I'll drink water every time.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that's probably a lie.
Yeah.
But,
Nope.
That is hilarious. Any other nopes that you have?
yeah, I think the nope, going back to that, get rid of all bitterness. I'm not going to allow bitterness and resentment. I really have been focused. The nope is it's not going to take my peace. It's not going to take my serenity. You know,
That's good.
I really want to be focused on that. And the reason why that's a challenge, the nope is how do I do that? Because every situation has an opportunity for you to have an opinion, as I do, and take your joy, take your moment.
That's good.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Man, our best hope or nopes yet. So,
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry. Do you have any hope or nopes?
Oh yeah, I actually do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my tournament bracket.
Oh, did you? Are you
a nope.
out? You were number one for a while there. And
I was
then
number one for a
got knocked
day,
out.
and then
Now
Kansas
you're
Jayhawks.
Are you 11?
Yeah.
Got it. Sorry about you. But hey, that is our episode for today. We're so grateful that you took time to listen or to watch. Make sure that you share this with everyone in your sphere of influence and subscribe so that you are the first one notified the next time an episode is dropped. And we will see you back here in the next episode.